Hi there and welcome. In this tutorial we will discuss how to transfer and export your animation from Maya to Unreal 4 or Unreal 5 successfully without any scripts or plugins. Okay, transferring animation between the two softwares depending on the first place on your rig chain, the rig that you did in Maya, and the names. So we will discuss about tips and tricks about rigging for Unreal, and we will test on 3 projects. Okay, this is free 3D model. We will rig very simple rig to just explain the idea, and this robot also we will rig it very simple rig and transfer it to Unreal with very simple animation. And the third thing is this anime school rig. Okay, I did this shot on anime school and we will transfer this to Unreal. Okay, so before I start I would like to clarify that all the steps I'm gonna to say or explain are result for a big R&D I did for VFX projects in Egypt. And I'd like to thank Hussein Chalan. He's an amazing Unreal artist that helped me to figure out how Unreal understand rigs. So I would like to thank him very much. So let's start with this project, with this model. First of all, we will check the groups. So we know that rigging depends on the first place on the groups for your model. So let's group this car. So we finished grouping the car. So something to note, I won't explain every step I do in rigging. So I depend on you that you already has a great experience rigging. So the first steps that the grouping or the joint orientation or something that you should know. So to hit the point, I will start with the big differences between the normal rig and the Unreal rig. Okay, so we grouped our model. Okay, and let's put it in one group. So great, let's start our rigging. First joint, always name it root. Okay, and if there's multiple rigs in the scene or you will import multiple rigs to Unreal, you can name it root, and the second rig name it root underscore version 001, and the third rig root underscore version 002, and so on. Okay, so the first joint in the chain should be named root. So now we have our root joint and we can duplicate it, and let's on the transparent on joints and put the joint here and select the wheel for group and click match transition and match rotate. And now we have our joint here. I'm sure that the orientation isn't correct, but I'm not trying to fix it now. It's not my issue. I'm just explaining the idea. So now let's do a chain also on the mirror to explain how to make something like with 2 joints and how to make it movable and transfer it to Unreal. So now we finished building our chain. Okay, and I would like to clarify something, that it's okay to build your controller's setup and constrain it to joint. That's okay. So we finished our setup, our chain setup, and I would like to clarify something, that it's okay to put your controllers and constrain it to joint. It's so totally okay, and we can transfer it to Unreal. And now let's skin. Now we will start skin painting. Make sure that the skin is working okay. Okay, so let's select all the joints, all the parts, I'm sorry, and it's wheel 4 joint, and so now our car is ready to be animated and exported to Unreal. So let's make just very fast animation and make it like, leave it like 30 frames per second. It's okay. Okay, that's our basic animation. Okay, we're gonna transfer it to Unreal. Another thing to explain, it's important to organize your materials in Maya, because in Unreal you would like to just replace the material name with your material in Unreal. So I don't like to like assign material and call it, let's have an example, any name, and another material, and name it something like that. Okay, that's a big wrong. You should classify your materials well with names. So the body of the car, we can assign material, we can exclude the glass, okay, and assign new material, and let's call it body. So in Unreal, try to categorize everything you want to export to be understandable in Unreal. Okay, so this is material node, we're gonna transfer it as a material node, so the name should have like M capital underscore the name of the object. M stands for material. Okay, something like that, and you can assign any material with a good name on the tires also. Okay, the export settings. First of all, you should select, let's save incremental. So now we can select our chain and select our car geo and go to file, export selection, and go to option box and export selection. Okay, from here we gonna say animation and bake animation and put the time slide range from 0 to 1. And so after bake animation we can select constraints and skeleton definitions, and make sure that we select also deformed models and binary, that's better, and we choose like VFX 2018. So we will test it in Unreal right now, and after that we will move on to the other projects. So let's start Unreal. So we opened Unreal 5 and I'd like to organize my file, so I will need to make folder, call it, and we can import it in it. So here we're gonna choose some options, so reset to default, and we're gonna choose geometry and scanning weights, and import animation, the exported time, convert scene for sure, and now import. So now we imported our FBX file. So let's explain something else here. Every animation we import in Unreal has some nodes. So he has something like static mesh, and that's geometry but has no keys, and the geometry with joints and has keys. So the object with geometry with no keys, we call it static mesh. So we have it here, something like that, and we can drag and drop here in the scene. Okay, so first thing is to zero our translate and make sure that the rotation is 0 also. Okay, we can hide this. Okay, now we have our car here, so let's make sequence, level sequence, and name it the default name. Okay, and I'm gonna bring it here. So SM stands for static mesh underscore car. Okay, with selected static mesh car, we can drag and drop to our sequencer and press S key. Select it and press S. So it bought here a key animation, and we can go for track animation, import animation, And now we have our own animation. Okay, that's it. It's pretty easy, right? And we now have our own animation here in Unreal. Okay, so this is the first successful transfer. Let's do the same with the another projects. So now we have finished our grouping, and let's start put our joints and organizing them and their names. Basically, we did our joint chain now, we named it root underscore version 001 as we explained before, to import with the same rig here that the main chain called root only. So root only and root underscore version 001. And now let's have a cool time with the skinning. And now we have done our scanning and rigging, so let's make very speed animation to just clarify our idea. So now we have this weird animation just for test our workflow. Animation, pick animation from 0 to 1, the time slider range, and deformed models. This is very important with the skinned geometries, something like this, and constraints of course. Now we can go to Unreal and make another folder to organize our work as we said before, and robot underscore version 02, and we can import our robot and check our settings, something like skeletal mesh, port mesh, geometry, and skinning weights, and all it's okay. So import. Now it's imported. We can now as we said before, we can drag and drop our static mesh here in the scene. And we can zero out our transformations, and we can come here and hide our car. Okay, and we can bring our sequencer, drag and drop our robot, and just click S, and from track, animation, and select robot version to animation. That's already imported with it, and now we have our cool animation or weird animation. And now we have our weird animation, or it's weird really, but we have transferred successfully our animation. Okay, let's go to the third test. So now we will start explaining some tips and tricks in scene like this, scene that has environment static and have its own character with its own chain rig that we won't be able to change, and some external stuff that like that shield that we won't be able to change also. So how to transfer this whole scene with the static mesh, something like environment, something static, and like the character, shield, and the camera animation also. So first of all, we should know that Unreal doesn't understand any only mesh. So in Unreal there is no only mesh. we should have rigged mesh. We should have skinned mesh. Okay, so we have this environment. This we can call it something like static mesh, that it hasn't any keys or animation, but we need to transfer this environment to Unreal. So we have to rig it with only at least one joint and skin it to this joint to make Unreal able to read this mesh. So Unreal doesn't read only mesh, it read only the skinned mesh, even if we won't animate this mesh. Okay, let's transfer this environment first. So for this environment we will make joint any place. I want to focus on this. So this is the joint, and we can make it bigger, something like that, and of course call it root. Okay, and let's zero it out, and let's bind it to the environment. Okay, so we have now rigged our scene, and that's important. So let's transfer it first and export selection. Of course, bake it. You won't lose anything if you bake it, even if it wasn't animatable. How we transfer this rig? Okay, for anime school rig, I always love to use geometry cache in Unreal, because it's chain, it's a little bit tricky and disturbing very much. So it's not joints and constraints as usual, it's locator and Nirbus, and there's mesh inside and something little bit difficult. So we have to cache it first, but before we cache it I need to hide joints, and I need to select the rig and select and assign only one material. We select this visible mesh, and we select our armor, our shield. Okay, and we can go for cache, Olympic cache, export selection to Olympic, time slider from 14, and we can choose right visibility, that's important, and UV right, strip namespaces, world space, and export selection. And we can make it here version 2. So in Unreal, let's make folder, call it anime school underscore version 2, and let's import. First of all, let's import our now we have our scene. So now we have our scene. Let's import our character. Let's make another folder, call it character, and import it. But here we will import geometry cache or Olympic file, so keep focus on this. Open, and I will choose skeletal, okay, and our animation starts from 14, and that's very important to make the preset Autodesk 3ds Max, not Maya. 3ds Max, not Maya. So now we have our static mesh and our animation. We can check our animation to see it. That's our animation. Okay, cool. First of all, we have to drag and drop our static animation here, and of course zero our attributes, and we can open the sequencer, and let's drag and drop this Anime School version 2 squashed and weird thing. Don't worry, just drag and drop in the sequencer. Go to the first frame, it's 14, the shot starts from 14, and now you can go to animation and put your animation here, right? So after that we have a geometry cache used in the scene, and we have a static mesh, so we have to play now to see first our animation, and that's our animation. Great, right? So maybe in some things it will show like squashed, something like weird like that, but don't worry, when you come to render it will render okay. Just need here to expand our animation a little bit, and we can play, and that's it. That's our animation, right? So we transferred our animation here in Unreal with the custom rig, and we changed all the material imported from Maya to this color. Okay, the Unreal artist or the lighting artist can put your textures and Udemy textures, and everything will be okay. Let's talk now about how to transfer our camera. So key focus. So first of all, we have the camera under this group. Okay, we can delete this and make this is our main camera, right? Okay, in production we always use multiple offset camera, something like the camera node under group to offset and to add extra animation, and we can make it under 2 groups. Okay, to transfer this camera from outside this group we have to make some steps. First of all, we have to unlock distribute. So now we can go to this camera to pick it. We can click pick selection, and now we have our camera animation under animated group. So first of all, come to the first frame and duplicate the camera and shift P to make it outside the group. Okay, so second thing, make this camera as a parent and select the another camera. So let's call it camera picked. Select this and make parent constraint. And now we have the 2 cameras moving with each other's, right? And it took all the animation of the old camera, and we can now pick it. So now we have transferred our camera under animated group to the root of outliner in Maya, right? So let's delete this constraint and we have our camera. Okay, that's great. So to transfer this camera that has keys and specific animation, we should know that Unreal also doesn't understand the only camera or the only node camera, doesn't understand this node, doesn't understand this animation. So it should be a child for also a joint. So we talked about static mesh, and it should be something like skin to joint, but also the camera should has its own joint in the hierarchy. So how we can do this and how we can adjust the orientation. Okay, so now in Maya we have Z in the depth, right, and X for the right and left movement or the band movement, right? Okay, for Unreal, the joint that will be parent for this camera should has its X replaced with the Z, so X and Z. So that's gonna be the X and that's gonna be the Z. So how can we do this, right? We have our joint here, but our joint now has the same wrong orientation for the camera, right? And Unreal won't understand this. So how we can make it? Okay, first of all, let's press D and press G or J. I'm sorry, press D and J and rotate the orientations. Okay, now it's rotated. Okay, let's go now and modify and pick pivot, and after that freeze transformation. And now we have our orientation for this joint has been corrected, right? Okay, so let's take our camera and select our root and select parent, and let's pick our animation on the joint. Okay, and now let's delete this constraint. Now we have the correct orientation on the joint that we need the camera to be under it, right? Under it in the hierarchy. So we will drag and drop this camera under the root, and we will delete its animation. Okay, we don't need any keys on the camera because the root already is moving. And if we logged from this camera, we now have our camera animation is set up correctly. So to ensure that we are ready to transfer our camera animation from Maya to Unreal, there is certain steps that we have to be sure that we did it all. Let's make sure that our camera have been baked and be outside here in the root. That's the first step. Second step, let's add joint as a parent for our camera, and let's edit its orientation to make the X is the facing axis for the camera, the Z axis is the pan axis. Okay, so now let's select our root and go to export selection, VFX export, and go to here and call it cam underscore version 001. Okay, how to import this camera animation in Unreal? Let's come here in the sequencer and go to this icon and create camera. Let's call it cam enemy school. Now we can go to import, select the camera enemy school from the sequencer and click import, and we choose our path and select the camera. Okay, match by name, false. Force front X axis, no, because we did it before in Maya, right? And create cameras, no. Reduce keys, no. And import. Now we have our camera animation set up correctly. Now after we imported our camera animation from import and selected our camera, okay, we have now this flipped a little bit, right? Something like fixed angle. So how to fix it? We can go to transform, then rotation and roll. We're gonna find, I'm sorry, not here, in the camera keys, we're gonna find that the rotation or roll is fixed number and it's wrong. So we can easily go for all these keys and delete it and make roll 0. And let's fix our camera focal length, something wider, something like this, right, as the shot in Maya. So sometimes after we import our camera animation and adjust it, we see our things like out of focus. So there is a manual focus distance that we can adjust also. And now we have our camera animation with our animation with custom rigs from Maya. So this way can also work on VFX rigs that free online. We can test something else. Now we will do our last test. This rig is free from troung rigs. Thank you troung for this amazing rig. So we can make like very fast animation right now. And now we have our simple animation. I know this is a piece of shit, but I made it in just like 2 or 3 minutes. So just to test our workflow and VFX trigs. Okay, that's our Maya animation. Let's transfer it into Unreal with the same steps. Let's select our geometry and go to cache, Alembic cache, export selection to Alembic, and ensure that the range is correct, and UV right, strip namespaces, and word space, and right visibility, export selection, and we can make it something like. And now let's make new folder, dragon, and import the Alembic file, and of course we will select skeletal mesh as we talked about. And now we imported our dragon. Let's drag and drop in the scene, hide the floor, and select the dragon static mesh and press F. Okay, that's our cool dragon. Okay, now let's grab our sequencer. Okay, and we drag and drop our dragon here. We can start with frame 1 till frame 100, let's say here, and we can stop here and drag animation, dragon animation, and now our strong dragon animation is in Unreal, and that's a great thing. Now we can transfer every VFX trig into Unreal easily and efficient way. Thank you, that was my tutorial for today. I hope that I make something good, and if you think about anything, just comment me or private message, and thank you. Bye bye.